For 5 years, my life ran on the same quiet routine. Wake up early, work late, send money downstairs, no vacations, no new car, no expensive dinners, no upgrades. Even my phone was 5 years old. People at work thought I was unusually disciplined. Minimalist, they called it. The truth was much simpler. Every extra dollar I earned went to my parents. 5 years ago, they sat me down at my kitchen table and told me everything was gone. A bad investment, my father said. The markets had collapsed. Their retirement fund had disappeared almost overnight. My mother cried while explaining how embarrassed they were. "We never wanted to depend on you," she said, "but we have nowhere else to go." So I offered them my basement. At first it was supposed to be temporary, a few months. Just enough time for them to recover. But temporary arrangements have a way of becoming permanent when guilt is involved. They moved in with 2 suitcases and a few boxes. I told them not to worry about rent. I covered the groceries. I covered the utilities. I paid their medical bills. Whenever my father mentioned medication costs or doctor visits, I transferred money without asking questions. I told myself I was being a good son, a responsible son, a son who understood that family comes before comfort. And for 5 years, I believed that story completely. Then yesterday, a leaking water heater changed everything. The plumber had barely started inspecting the pipes when he asked me to move a stack of old boxes behind the heater. That's when I saw it. A leather portfolio. Dark brown. Expensive. The kind of thing you might see a lawyer carrying into a courtroom. It was tucked carefully behind the heater tank, like something someone hoped would never be discovered. I assumed it was another collection of debt papers, medical bills, loan statements, evidence of the financial disaster they had described so many times. Instead, inside the folder was something else entirely. A property deed for a beachfront house in Florida. The purchase price was just over $1 million. Paid in full. Paid in full! 3 months ago. The buyer listed on the paperwork was my father. The legal owner was my sister. At that moment, the entire story of the last 5 years rearranged itself inside my mind like pieces of a puzzle snapping into place. My parents were never broke. They never lost their retirement. They had simply moved their money somewhere else. And I had been funding their lives while they quietly built someone else's future. When my parents first moved in, my mother cried constantly. She apologized for being a burden. She told me how ashamed she felt depending on her own child. My father avoided eye contact for weeks. He spent most of his time downstairs, watching television quietly, acting like a man who had lost everything. The performance was convincing. Convincing enough that I reorganized my entire life around their survival. I postponed my wedding. My fiancée at the time said she understood. But eventually, the strain became too much. Supporting 2 extra adults meant working longer hours, taking fewer breaks, saving every possible dollar. We ended the engagement 2 years later. My parents told me they felt terrible about it. They said they never wanted their problems to damage my happiness. But they also never offered to leave, so I continued working. 70 hours a week sometimes, while they lived downstairs, rent-free. Every time I bought something for myself, I felt guilty. A new jacket, a dinner out, even something as simple as replacing my broken laptop. My mind always returned to the same thought. What if my parents needed that money more? What if their situation was worse than they were telling me? And then there was my sister, Sarah. Sarah visited once or twice a month. Always exhausted, always overwhelmed, always talking about how difficult it was to pay her rent. She worked part-time, said full-time jobs were too stressful. My parents would quietly slip her some of the money I gave them. Just a little support, they said. She needed help too. I believed them because I believed we were all struggling together. I believed we were a family trying to survive a shared disaster. But now, looking back, the reality was painfully obvious. I was the only one living in the disaster. The rest of them had simply built a comfortable shelter inside my effort. Family psychologists describe a pattern called financial enmeshment. It often appears in families where one child becomes successful earlier than the others. The parents slowly shift responsibility onto that child. At first, it looks like normal support, helping with groceries, covering a bill here and there. But over time, the dynamic changes. The successful child stops being a son or daughter. They become a resource, a financial safety net. Sometimes even a silent sponsor for the rest of the family. The parents frame it as necessity, sacrifice, survival. But in some cases, it becomes something much darker. A system where guilt replaces honesty, and responsibility becomes permanent. In my case, the system had an even more specific structure. Everything I earned was redirected toward maintaining my parents' appearance of poverty. And while I was working overtime to support them, they were quietly redirecting their own money somewhere else. Towards Sarah, the favorite child. After discovering the portfolio, I spent several hours reading every document inside. The beach house wasn't a small purchase. It was a luxury property. Private beach access. 4 bedrooms. Marble countertops. Oceanfront balcony. The purchase receipt was stamped paid in full. The transaction date was only 3 months earlier, which meant that while I was eating cheap instant noodles to keep our grocery bills low, my parents were helping my sister choose furniture for $1 million home. The folder contained something else too, a handwritten note from my father to the real estate lawyer. It read, "Put everything in Sarah's name. She deserves a good life. Not a single mention of me." Not a single reference to the 5 years I had spent funding their survival. Just a quiet confirmation of what I had always suspected. I wasn't part of their future plan. I was simply the bridge that helped them reach it. There's another psychological pattern that explains behavior like this. It's called the faux martyr. A faux martyr is someone who creates the image of suffering in order to receive sympathy, protection, or resources from others. They talk about hardship constantly. They describe themselves as victims, but behind the scenes, the suffering is exaggerated or even completely fabricated. The goal isn't survival. The goal is control. When someone plays the role of the struggling parent long enough, the people around them begin adjusting their lives to compensate. Children feel obligated. They sacrifice time, relationships, and financial security. Not because they are forced to, but because they believe they are protecting someone vulnerable. The faux martyr understands this dynamic perfectly and uses it. In my case, my parents had spent 5 years convincing me they were barely surviving, but the reality was something else entirely. They were simply using my house as a free hotel, while they quietly prepared a luxury future for my sister. I didn't confront them immediately. Instead, I made a phone call to a real estate agent. 3 days later, a large for sale sign appeared in my front yard. My mother noticed it first. She came upstairs holding a cup of tea, staring out the window with confusion. "Mark," she said slowly, "why is there a real estate sign outside? I kept my voice calm. I'm selling the house. The silence that followed was immediate and heavy. My father came upstairs from the basement. What do you mean you're selling it? He asked. I shrugged slightly. I lost a lot of money recently. Bad investment. The phrase felt strangely familiar as I said it. My mother's face changed instantly. Fear. Real fear this time. But where will we go? She asked. I watched the panic spread across both of their faces, and then I placed the leather portfolio on the kitchen table. I slid the deed across the surface toward them. My father looked down, and everything inside him seemed to collapse at once. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply gave them the same calm explanation they had given me 5 years earlier. I'm broke, I said. Lost everything. Then I added one final sentence. You should probably move in with Sarah. I gave them 48 hours to pack their things, not because I was angry, but because I finally understood something important. Some family relationships aren't built on love. They're built on convenience. And once you stop being convenient, the relationship ends naturally. I didn't just remove them from my basement. I removed them from my life.